The film opens with a terrified passenger arriving in Los Angeles for the holidays. John McClane's a New York City detective with a 6-month backlog of scumbags he's trying to put behind bars. A friendly stranger suggests that to relax he take his shoes off at his hotel, which John soon comes to regret hearing. John's estranged wife Holly moved their kids out to LA when she accepted a high-paying job at the Nakatomi Corporation's unfinished American headquarters. She's invited him to spend Christmas with the kids, where he's hoping for a reconciliation with her. After departure, McClane's met at the airport by a first-time limo driver named Argyle. He's been hired to drive John to the Nakatomi Plaza, where she's currently attending an office Christmas party. Argyle is the friendliest person in LA and offers to wait in the garage to give John a lift to a hotel, should things not work out with Holly. When John uses the building's staff directory, he finds Holly's gone back to using her maiden name instead of McClane. On his way to the elevators, he notices that security's acting more relaxed than usual as it's the holidays. He joins the party on the 30th floor and searches for Holly in the crowd before meeting her boss Mr. Takagi, who he thanks for the limo ride with Argyle and gets shown to Holly's office. Another employee named Ellis sits there snorting lines and attempts to play it off in front of the policeman. He's been after Holly ever since she started there and is completely ignored by her when she enters. Holly's still in love with her husband and takes him to the corporate bathroom to wash off the flight. She offers the spare bedroom at her new place, but they begin to have an argument about her now going by her maiden name until she's eventually called away. As the party continues, a large truck makes its way into the garage while a car pulls up out front of the building. Two men enter and walk right up to the security desk, shooting the guard dead with a silenced pistol. As Theo jumps on the computers and begins working on gaining access to the Nakatomi vault, his accomplice Karl goes on and guns down the lazy guard still planted in the same position John saw him in earlier. The rest of their 13-man team emerge from the truck in the garage, fronted by the cunning German mastermind Hans Gruber. They begin to split up, with Theo and Hans locking down the building and the youngest Tony being sent to take out the alarm system, while almost being beaten to it by his big brother with a chainsaw. Meanwhile, John's taken his shoes off like the frequent flyer suggested when Gruber's 12 reach the 30th floor. Their gunfire alerts John, who witnesses the group take the partygoers as hostages and round them up in the foyer. John's able to remain unseen but is left barefoot by the relaxing suggestion. In searching for the operations manager, Gruber spouts off personal details about Takagi to the crowd until he eventually steps forward at the mention of his children. They take him a few floors up, where Gruber explains that he's here to steal $640 million worth of bonds from the building's vault. Theo and Karl seem to have a bet on whether or not Takagi will give them the code to gain access, but Theo wins when the father of 5 refuses and Hans executes him. John's made his way into the room but isn't able to save him as he witnesses the murder, then is almost caught himself by Karl, who seems a lot more unhinged than any of the others. John goes to an abandoned floor under construction and sets off the alarm in an attempt to alert police. It briefly works, but Tony enters claiming that they've been called off, and acts friendly towards what he assumes to just be a regular partygoer, but then shoots wildly at speculative air. John's able to get the drop on the 7-foot Aryan but decides to engage with him in a reckless rear naked. The scuffle soon ends when the two tumble down a stairwell and Tony's neck snaps. John takes his weapon and gear but is disappointed to learn Tony has feet smaller than his sister and he's forced to continue barefoot. The corpse is sent down to the 30th floor with a jolly warning that the fly in the ointment's now armed with a machine gun. All while John's hiding on top of the elevator and writing down anything useful he overhears. Karl's furious over his brother's death but is told to calm down by Hans until Theo can do his thing. John goes to the roof and attempts to contact the police on Tony's radio, but they assume it's a prank call and tell him to get off the line. He's overheard by Hans, who sends Karl to the roof along with Franco and the silky-haired Fritz. The moment they spot McClane, they open fire, sending him running for his life, and the cops suggesting they send their best officer to investigate. Sergeant Al's currently buying munchies for his pregnant wife when he gets the call and is able to see the gunfire directly from the street below. Up top, John flees back inside the building and manages to give them the slip when he uses his weapon to stop a fan blade spinning. The cunning cop then uses it as a grappling hook to belay himself down a ventilation shaft but loses it in the process. Karl's ordered to return by Hans, but he's begun to ignore his boss's orders to catch McClane. He almost locates him in the vents or gets shot in the face from above, when Fritz informs Karl that police have arrived, so he returns to Hans. John goes to the conference room to try get Al's attention but instead manages to get the drop on Marco, until he ducks and gets Heinrich lit up. John takes cover under a table until Marco requires a reload, and since he doesn't bother to take cover, he gets an entire clip emptied into him. Al's greeted at the entrance by Eddie, who's got the easiest job of the crew and just sits on desk duty watching the game. After finding nothing during his intensive search, the sergeant calls it a night as his wife's waiting on her Twinkies, when John garners his attention with the corpse of Marco and a cool one-liner heard by no one but himself. Gruber's mercs open fire on Al, but in a slick display of driving he avoids any danger and gracefully parks up nearby. The LAPD arrive in full force and surround the tower, however it's all going just as Hans planned. While trying to get any information out of the hair in his soup, Hans questions John over the radio, but he doesn't give anything up except that he has the detonators crucial to Gruber's plan. After an insulting sign-off, Hans orders Karl and his mercs to hunt McClane down and retrieve his detonators. With Al still on the radio, John informs him that Gruber's 12 are now down to 9 and any other details he can think of. Deputy Police Chief Robinson shows up with a SWAT team and disbelieves anything Al has to say for some reason, to the extent that he even suggests that maybe Marco was just a depressed stockbroker. Reports on the siege by Richard Thornburg alert Argyle to the fact that he's currently locked inside the garage, as he's been partying up this entire time and heard nothing. Dwayne attempts to send SWAT in, but Theo monitors their movements and has Uli put on the front door with Billy, where he simply can't resist a late-night snack. When the SWAT team reach the front door, he opens fire, forcing them to retreat and call in the pride of the LAPD. An armored vehicle drives right up to the front doors, but Hans has a plan for that also. He sends James with a rocket launcher up to meet a second new guy, Alexander, who I can only assume are the heavy weapons specialists. They bolt a giant launcher into the floor and fire 2 rockets at the vehicle, completely disabling it. To prevent any more of this nonsense, John sends some detonators and C4 down an elevator shaft on top of them, blowing out the entire floor and killing both Jimmy and Alex. Throughout the night, John and Al develop a friendship, while giving Rich one of the 50+ F-bombs in this film whenever he chimes in. The out-of-his-mind Ellis attempts to negotiate with Hans, claiming that he's an old friend of John. With Gruber assuming he now has leverage, he butts in on a conversation between John and Al to threaten that he has his friend hostage. Since John had never even met the guy before tonight and he can't give back the detonators, he goes radio silent, leaving Ellis to receive the Takagi special. It's at this time Hans gets on the radio and gives Thornburg a list of impossible demands, that 3 groups of terrorists be released from their prisons across the globe, all smokescreen to buy them time for the robbery. He goes to inspect the explosives but gets cornered by McClane and manages to pull off an American accent, pretending to be an escaped hostage who thinks John's a terrorist. So the detective hands him a pistol to help find a way out, but Gruber draws it on him and attempts to pull the trigger. With an unloaded pistol, John confirms he's talking to Hans, having never seen his face before now, when 2 men enter and John shoots Fritz dead. He also shoots out Franco's legs, killing him, but Karl pins John down in a glass server room, so Gruber instructs him to shoot the glass, having noticed he's still barefoot. His plan works as John's forced to flee by dragging his bloody feet into a nearby bathroom, leaving the detonators to be retrieved by Hans. However, Karl's furious his brother's killer's still alive. John begins removing shards of glass from his foot, while hearing from Al that he hasn't had the nerve to pull his pistol since he shot a 13-year-old boy by accident. John tells him to let Holly know that he loves her and sets out for the rooftop once again, learning that Hans doesn't intend to use the helicopter to escape and is instead planning to blow the pad. He has Uli force hostages to the roof, intending to kill them in the explosion and disappear as if he died alongside them. John's finally captured by Karl, who luckily isn't adverse to fighting his brother's much smaller killer with his bare hands, or rather his feet, as he spends most of his time kicking John around and even landing a bullet to his shoulder, until getting a chain wrapped around his neck and being hung. On the way to the roof, McClane guns down Uli and begins shooting to get the hostages back inside. Hans' reason for getting the police involved is revealed when Special Agent Johnson and his unrelated partner Agent Johnson arrive on the scene. They disconnect the power, shutting down the final electromagnetic lock on the vault, giving Hans just what he wants. The 2 stooges then take a helicopter to the top of the tower in an attempt to fire at terrorists, but just end up shooting at John by mistake. With the hostages back inside safely, the only deaths caused by the helipad exploding are the unrelated Johnson brothers. John escapes by tying a fire hose around his waist and jumping from the rooftop, then shooting out a window to regain entry, then untying the hose before it falls and drags him over as well. With McClane's name leaked on the radio by Ellis, Thornburg located Holly's home and threatened her housekeeper with deportation. He broadcasts an interview with the family revealing John to be the husband of Holly, alerting Hans, who keeps her down by the vault, as his hostage. With only 4 left, Argyle notices Theo preparing an ambulance as their real getaway vehicle in the garage. At full speed he plows the limo into the side and finishes Theo off with a mean cross. John's down to only 2 bullets in his pistol, so he knocks Christoph out in the shortest appearance by any of the terrorists and bluffs the remaining 2 with his unloaded weapon. With Holly as his hostage, Hans orders John to drop the weapon and tells Eddie not to fire. He wants to boast for a moment before killing the troublemaker, but in doing so gives John time to draw the pistol taped to his back, killing Eddie and hitting Hans. Tumbling backwards, Gruber grabs Holly, almost dragging her out the window, but he's only holding on by her Rolex. So before he can pull his trigger, John detaches it, sending him plummeting from the Nakatomi Plaza. With Hans being cleaned up off the sidewalk, the McClanes embrace and leave together to meet Al for the first time. John and Al embrace with less tongue and are interrupted by Dwayne talking about property damage or something. Having pretended to be a hostage, Karl returns and attempts to kill John, but is taken out by the quickest draw on the force, showing Al still got it. Though afterwards he almost fires on another kid when Argyle comes in a bit too fast. On their way out, Holly breaks Thornburg's nose for bringing her kids into it and leaves in what's left of Argyle's limousine, into what's left of Los Angeles. And the movie ends. So you made it. I appreciate your time. I couldn't have done it without you. Tell your mother I said thanks.
CD, CB, TV, telephone, full bar, VHS.